37% of Americans cannot cover a $400 emergency with cash today, not the poorest 37%. All Americans, surveyed by the Federal Reserve in their most recent household economics report. And here's the layer nobody mentions alongside that statistic. Most of those people are not reckless. They are not irresponsible. They have a net worth problem disguised as a behavior problem. Meanwhile, those under 35 have a median net worth of about $39,000. Half of them have less. And the overwhelming majority are running the same broken mental model. Nothing real changes until I hit $1 million. So they grind. They wait. They stare at a 7-figure number on the horizon and they walk straight past 4 smaller doors that were already unlocked and waiting. I am going to draw you the actual map today. 5 specific numbers. What each one does to your life. The math behind why it does it. And one invisible threshold that has no round number, appears on nobody's list, and that no bank will ever announce to you when you cross it. That last one might be the most important thing in this entire video. Here's the thing most people are getting completely wrong about net worth. A higher number is not primarily about what you can buy. It is about what it does to your decision making, your risk tolerance, your nervous system. Money is not a spreadsheet number. It is a psychological operating system. And like an operating system, it runs at different speeds, at different stages. Your life does not transform once. It transforms 5 times, at 5 different thresholds, each one changing something different. One changes your stress. One changes your momentum. One changes your negotiating spine. One changes your options. And one changes the fundamental question of who owns your hours. Most people have the sequence backwards, which is why they feel stuck for so long. Today, I am going to give you the sequence. Think of it like an engine and a passenger. Right now, if you are below certain levels, you are the engine. Every paycheck you receive, every dollar you save, you are doing 100% of the propulsion. Your money is in the passenger seat, maybe contributing something small, but mostly along for the ride. The entire game is to flip those roles. At a certain level, your money becomes the engine and you become the passenger. The question is not whether that flip happens. The question is which level triggers it. And the answer is not where most people think. In a few minutes, I am going to show you the specific level that changes the math more than any other on this list, and it is almost never discussed. But first, here is why the entry-level threshold is both the most underestimated and the most reachable line on the entire map. Level 1 is $10,000. I can feel you already dismissing that number. 10,000 does not make you wealthy. It does not impress anyone. But watch what it actually does to your financial operating system. Because the function of this number has almost nothing to do with its size. The Federal Reserve's most recent SHED survey found that 63% of adults said they could cover a hypothetical $400 emergency expense exclusively using cash or its equivalent, meaning 37% could not. That 37% is not a population of careless spenders. It is a population of people who have never once held enough of a buffer to absorb a small shock without it becoming a financial event. The flat tire lands on the credit card. The dental bill lands on the credit card. The broken appliance lands on the credit card. The average credit card interest rate is around 21% APR, according to the Federal Reserve's most recent data. So the emergency does not end. It follows you for months, collecting rent the entire time. Meet Diana. Diana is 34, responsible, earns a solid income. Her net worth sits near zero. Not because she is reckless, because she has never once held $10,000 in breathing room. Every time she builds a small cushion, something breaks. The car, the tooth, the appliance. Each emergency lands on the card. The card charges her 21%. She pays interest on her own bad luck, month after month. And the balance barely moves. Run the math on a single year of what Diana's missing buffer actually costs her. Say she carries $5,000 on that card at 20%. That is $1,000 a year in pure interest. Not a vacation, not an asset, not a memory, rent paid to a bank for something that already happened. Over 5 years, that is $5,000 evaporated silently. On a billing statement she barely looks at. Diana does not have a spending problem. She has a buffer problem. That distinction is everything. The moment she builds a real $10,000 cushion, the spiral stops. The next flat tire happens. She pays cash. No new balance. No 20% shadow following her for a year. The emergency does not stop. Her reaction to it completely changes. You think the problem is the emergency. It is not. The problem is having no buffer between the emergency and the debt spiral. $10,000 is that buffer. It does not earn you anything flashy. What it earns you is an unshakable response to small chaos. And small chaos is what derails most people. Here is what nobody thinks about when they dismiss 10,000 as too small to matter. This is not a savings goal. It is a psychological switch. Below it, you live in reaction mode. Every financial decision is defensive. Every month is triage. Above it, for the first time in many people's lives, you can think one step ahead instead of one step behind. That buffer does not earn interest in a meaningful way. What it earns is nerve. The nerve to negotiate your salary instead of accepting the first number. The nerve to walk away from the toxic manager instead of tolerating it for another 6 months. The nerve to take the slightly better job across town. $10,000 in the bank is not spending money. It is the price of your own spine. And here is the encouraging piece. Level 1 is the most reachable line on the entire map. $300 a month, automatically transferred, gets you to $10,000 in under 3 years. No investing genius, no lucky break, no side hustle required. A small automatic transfer that runs while you sleep and does not require you to make a decision every month. Most people treat 10,000 like it is 10 years away. It is a 90-week project. The hardest part is not the math. It is starting before you feel ready. Level 1 rewards the person who begins. It has no opinion about whether the moment feels right. Stay with me, because what comes next is the threshold that one of the greatest investors of the 20th century called the single hardest part of building wealth. And he was absolutely right about why. Level 2 is $100,000. At a 1990s Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting, Charlie Munger said, "The first $100,000 is a bitch, but you gotta do it. I don't care what you have to do if it means walking everywhere and not eating anything that wasn't purchased with a coupon. Find a way to get your hands on $100,000. He then added, after that, you can ease off the gas. A billionaire told a room full of people that a modest six-figure number was the real hurdle. Not a million, 100,000. Why? Consider someone who saves and invests $10,000 every year. At a 7% annual return, their net worth will reach $100,000 in about 7.75 years. If they continue investing the same amount at the same rate, the next $100,000 arrives in only 5.5 years. That is 30% faster. And the only thing that changed is the size of the engine already running underneath them. At $100,000 invested, earning a 7% return, that generates $7,000, all while doing nothing. $7,000 per year without lifting a finger. Meet Carla. Carla is 32 and just crossed 100,000 invested. She did not inherit it. She built it across 7.5 slow years, exactly as the math predicted. She describes the first time she noticed it as something between relief and disbelief. She checked her brokerage account. On a morning she had added nothing. The market moved. Her balance jumped $2,000 in a single day. $2,000 she did nothing to earn. 7 years of being the engine herself, and finally the machine coughed to life. She was not rich. She felt something better. She felt momentum. And momentum compounds in ways that are hard to explain until you have personally sat across the table from your own. Here is the brutal reality of quitting before you reach 100,000. Two people start at zero, same income, same monthly discipline, at least for a while. One quits at 20,000, convinced the whole system is slow and pointless. The other grits their teeth and pushes to 100,000. 10 years later, they are not slightly apart. They are in different universes. The quitter restarts from near zero again and again because every emergency erodes whatever they built, and the compounding never gains enough mass to matter. The finisher watches compounding do heavy lifting for the rest of their life. Same income, same discipline, for that initial stretch. One decision made around that early doubting threshold split their entire financial futures in two. There's a story I think about when I hit those doubting moments myself. Ronald Reed was a Vermont janitor and gas station attendant. He died in 2015 at 92. He left an estate of roughly $8 million. He had never worked in finance, never earned a high salary, never received an inheritance. He saved quietly for decades, invested in index funds and individual blue chip stocks, and never interrupted compounding. His secret, when journalists finally pieced it together, was boring almost beyond description. He bought, he held, he did not sell. He lived below his means, drove old cars, wore a coat held together with a safety pin. He was the engine for long enough that the engine got big enough to run itself. The world only found out he had $8 million when his lawyer read the will. By the way, if you are finding value in this map, hit subscribe now. YouTube's algorithm may genuinely never surface my next video to you otherwise. I cover the mechanics behind the financial decisions you face every day, and I'd rather you actually see them. Now I need to pause here, because knowing these 5 numbers and building a real system around them are genuinely 2 different problems. The accumulation side of the map is hard. The withdrawal side, the part where you actually have to convert the number into a livable income for 30 or 40 years, is where most people's planning falls apart. Sequence of returns, risk, tax drag, the insurance gap that opens before Medicare kicks in at 65, the gap between what standard retirement advice tells you and what 50 years of historical data actually shows. These are the quiet mechanisms that undo people who did the savings work but never stress tested what happens when the withdrawals start. I spent a long time building something specifically for this problem. It is a digital book called The Exit Code. 8 chapters, no filler, built on 50 years of actual retirement data. The core framework is mathematical, not motivational. It turns maybe someday into a specific date with a specific number attached. 2 things I want to mention because they connect directly to what we are talking about today. The first is the $14,000 invisible bill, the insurance gap. The average retiree under 65 faces before Medicare becomes available, and that almost no retirement calculator accounts for. The second is the dynamic withdrawal method in Chapter 4, which addresses the 4% trap directly. The standard 4% rule works historically, but it works because of assumptions about the sequence of your first few years of returns. Get unlucky in year 1, and the math breaks down faster than most people realize. The exit code covers the specific buffer strategy that protects against that. You can get the full thing through the link in the description for less than a dinner out. The math on waiting is not neutral. Every year you do not have this framework is a year you are making accumulation decisions without a withdrawal strategy behind them. Back to the map. Level 3 is $250,000. This is the level almost nobody talks about because it does not have a cultural moment. No famous quote, no movie scene. But in terms of what it mechanically does to your financial life, it is arguably the most important line on the chart. Here is why. At $250,000 invested at a 7% average return, a single average year produces roughly $17,500. That is real money. That is close to what someone might earn working part-time for a year. Except this particular worker has no commute, no schedule, no performance review, and no sick days. It works every single day, holidays included, in perpetuity. But the reason level 3 changes everything is not the $17,500 in isolation. It is what it means relative to your savings rate. At $250,000, your portfolio in an average year starts earning close to what you can actually save from your salary. For most households saving $800 to $1,200 a month, that crossover where the portfolio out-contributes the paycheck happens somewhere right around this level. And when it crosses, something structurally shifts. Meet Marcus. Marcus is 40, earns a decent income, and saves about $900 a month from his paycheck. That is $10,800 a year in contributions from his labor. At $250,000 invested, a 7% year generates $17,500. His portfolio is out contributing him. His money now makes more in 1 year than he saves from working. He is still trading time for money at his desk. But his money stopped needing him to, and that gap widens every single year from here on, without any heroic action on his part. Now watch what that does to Marcus, and this is the psychological insight that almost every finance video skips entirely. It does not change his paycheck. It does not change his visible lifestyle. What changes is his patience with nonsense. Before this crossover, Marcus tolerated things because he felt he had no option. The unreasonable manager, the project he hated, the insulting counteroffer he took anyway. When $250,000 is behind him earning its own keep, he walks into those conversations differently, not recklessly, not arrogantly, with a quiet, math-backed calm that is almost impossible to fake. He knows the floor beneath him is real. He knows he is not one bad Tuesday away from starting over. His negotiating position changed without his title changing, without his salary changing, without anyone else in the room knowing that is what $250,000 actually buys. Not stuff, not freedom yet, posture. Okay, I want to give you a reality check on where this sits for most Americans. You think the problem is that most people cannot get to 250 because they do not earn enough. Actually, the problem is that most people cannot get to 250 because they spend the progression backwards. They buy the car after the raise, they upgrade the house after the bonus, they optimize for what level 4 looks like from the outside before they have passed level 2 on the inside. The engine never gets big enough to run itself because the passenger keeps demanding fuel it has not yet earned. Here is where the subplot I introduced at the top of this video resolves itself. The invisible crossover I mentioned, the one with no number, no party, no announcement, is exactly this. Somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000, depending on your savings rate. Your portfolio's annual return exceeds what you contribute from your salary. That is the day you stop being entirely dependent on your own labor. Your job becomes the passenger. Your investments become the engine. And nobody calls you, nobody sends a congratulations note. Your account just quietly does a thing 1 month that it did not do the previous month. And if you are not paying attention, you will miss it entirely. Most people miss it precisely because no financial institution has any incentive to celebrate it. Here's a story that puts a number on that. A 51-year-old man who owns a small service business has $700,000 invested across a brokerage account and a retirement account. He is not a millionaire. He has never made a headline. He does not post about his portfolio on social media. At $700,000 invested and a 7% average year, his portfolio generates roughly $49,000 annually. He saves about $30,000 a year from the business. His money out-contributes him by 60%. His crossover happened around $400,000. He did not notice the exact day. He just noticed gradually, over about a year, that the account balance was moving in a direction that felt different, more self-propelled, like something had changed in the underlying mechanics. He went to a Wednesday afternoon baseball game last month, sat in the sun for 4 hours, and thought about nothing in particular. That was $250,000 expanded over time, doing its job quietly. Level 4 is $1 million. And this is the number everyone fixates on from the very start, the cultural finish line, the title you hand to yourself, the goal that defines an entire generation's financial aspiration. So let me tell you what it actually does and what it does not. Today, more than 24 million people in this country have a net worth exceeding $1 million. That is roughly 1 in every 11 adults. The club is real, and it is growing. More than 1,000 people a day became millionaires in America in 2024, according to UBS. And yet, according to a 2025 survey by Northwestern Mutual, only 36% of US millionaires consider themselves wealthy. 36%. Almost 2/3 of people who have crossed this famous line do not feel it delivered what they expected. Here is why. Households with a net worth ranging from 1 million to 2 million had 66% of it tied up in their home and illiquid retirement accounts. Their wealth is real on the spreadsheet. It is not free cash. It is equity in a house they live in and accounts they cannot touch without penalties. A woman in California, quoted by Axios, explained it better than any data could. She and her husband are technically millionaires because of their home equity. After the mortgage, she said, there is not much left each month. She drives a 2016 Honda Odyssey with 175,000 miles on it. I know we're technically millionaires with our home equity, she said, but it isn't really helpful for monthly expenses. Congratulations on the 7 figures. Your van has feelings. The point is not to mock the achievement. The point is to be precise about what the million number actually does when you actually have it. What it does, invested properly and not locked in a primary residence, is this. At the 4% withdrawal guideline established by the Trinity study, tested across every rolling 30-year period from 1926 through 1995 with a 95 to 100% historical success rate. $1 million can produce $40,000 in the first year of retirement, with subsequent years adjusted for inflation, and historically, that portfolio would have survived 30 years in nearly every scenario tested, $40,000 a year. For many households living lean, especially with paid-off housing, that covers essentials. The floor of your life becomes real. Work does not become optional overnight, but it becomes a sentence you can renegotiate. What actually changes at level 4 is almost invisible from the outside. Most millionaires in the data live below their means, drive ordinary cars, buy store-brand groceries. What changes is the alarm clock, the meeting you sit through calmly, the performance review you walk into without your hands shaking, the negotiation where you can actually hear the other person's offer instead of immediately calculating whether you can afford to say no. The million does not buy a new lifestyle. It buys the quiet confidence to run the one you already have without performing desperation for an audience that does not care. And here is the trap that lives right at level 4. It is the exact moment lifestyle inflation feels most justified. You deferred the vacation, the car, the house upgrade for years. The million feels like permission. And every one of those upgrades is understandable, but together they can quietly reverse 10 years of compounding in 18 months. The machine took a decade to build. It fits very comfortably in a nicer garage. This is not a lecture, it is a structural warning. Level 4 is where discipline stops being a grind and starts being a daily choice. And that choice is harder when you finally feel like you have arrived. Level 5 is $2,500,000, according to Charles Schwab's 2024 Modern Wealth Survey. The average person believes $2.5 million is needed to feel wealthy, up 14% from $2.2 million in 2023. The survey respondents independently landed on the number that mathematics independently validates. Because at $2.5 million invested, the 4% guideline produces $100,000 per year. A full professional salary, generated by the portfolio itself, whether you show up anywhere or not. Now understand what that actually means relative to earning the same number at a job. The person at work trades time for their $100,000. Shows up, performs, maintains the relationship, keeps the boss happy, or at least tolerates them. The person at level 5 receives a structurally similar number, whether they show up or not. Same dollars, completely different ownership structure. One is rented from an employer, the other is owned outright. Most people spend their entire careers chasing the first. The second was the actual prize all along, and nobody told them clearly enough, early enough. What changes at level 5 is not your lifestyle in any visible way. You probably do not move. You do not suddenly eat differently. Many people at this level keep working because the work is meaningful, social, or structurally satisfying when it is no longer mandatory. The difference is that every hour is now genuinely yours to assign. The daily, renewable, conscious choice of what to do with your time belongs to you in a way that it simply did not before. That feeling, not the number, not the account balance, the feeling of choosing is what people were actually describing when they said they wanted to be wealthy. They just did not have a precise enough word for it. And here is the perspective that should recalibrate everything. The average net worth in the US is $1.06 million, while the median is $192,700, according to the Federal Reserve. Half of all households have less than that median. To be in the top 1% by net worth requires approximately $13.7 million. based on Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finance's data. You do not need 13 million to be free. You do not even need 5. Level 5 at 2.5 million already delivers the functional experience people imagine requires 10. The gap between 2.5 million and 10 million is mostly ego, larger scenery, and legacy planning. The freedom was purchased on the way up, not at the summit. So there is the full map: 10,000, 100,000, 250,000, 1 million, 2.5 million. 5 levels, 5 different things that change. Level 1 changes your stress response. Level 2 changes your momentum. Level 3 changes your negotiating position. Level 4 changes your options. Level 5 changes who owns your hours. And most people staring only at the million have been walking right past 4 smaller doors that were already open. They spent years grinding toward the famous number and missed the quieter number that actually changed the math first. Here are 3 specific, non-generic takeaways from everything I just showed you. Not general advice, calibrated specifically to this map. First, level 1 is a 90-week project, not a distant dream. $300 a month into a high-yield savings account, not invested, held as a buffer, gets you to $10,000 in under 3 years. The goal is specifically not to invest this money. It is to hold it. That buffer pays for itself in avoided credit card interest within 2 years of building it. And that is before it changes your ability to make decisions from a non-panicking position. Start the transfer today, not next month. Second, the race to 100,000 is the most psychologically brutal stretch in your financial life. And it is the most important to survive without quitting. It takes 7 to 8 years to save the first 100,000, no matter what the interest rate is, because the amount you save matters far more than your investment returns when you are starting out. This is not a bug. It is the design. The compounding ratio does not flip in your favor until you cross it. If you are currently in this stretch and it feels like it is not working, it is working. You are in the part that feels the worst right before the ratio changes. Third, track the invisible crossover. You will not get a notification. Nobody will celebrate it. Calculate once a year what your portfolio earned in returns versus what you contributed from your paycheck. The month those 2 lines cross, the month your money out contributes your savings, write it down somewhere permanent. That is the day the engine flipped. That is the day the passenger started driving. Every year after that, the gap widens. You just have to not interrupt it. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the people who figured that out earliest are currently sitting in the sun on a Wednesday afternoon thinking about absolutely nothing because the engine is running fine without them.